afternoon, gentlemen. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Really well. Sorry to keep you waiting there for like 2 of us just got caught up, so thanks for giving me a reason to duck out. Where's everybody calling out of today? Some at home, some in the field?
I'm in Glendive, Montana.
Glendive, excellent. Been through Glendive, I like it. How about you, Mitch, Tyler?
I'm in Bismarck at home today. We're at my parents' home today, helping out. But
Same here, Bismarck.
Thanks for making time here today, guys. Appreciate it.
of course,
I'm in Calgary.
You're in Calgary, so I kind of assumed, but I guess I shouldn't because I know that you're not always there for sure. So, good afternoon, Destin.
Hey, how's everyone today?
very good.
Sorry, thanks for waiting. I'm sorry I'm a few minutes late.
Oh, no problem.
No worries.
So I'm trying to pull up a good example right now of an agreement request. Or do you want me to go over the wind farm presentation first?
Let's start with that if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's always one of my favorites. So, sorry, Des, it's your presentation. Please go ahead.
No, you're okay. It's gonna be ours, Tom.
It wasn't even a rehearsed intro, but what I was saying, guys, is, you all have experience out in the field. Des has found a lot of success, doing some leasing activities here at NextEra as well. From a previous project, previous years, previous team, she's got this wind presentation. I like it so much here that we're getting some laminated versions. It's going to be in some of our lineman's briefcases, so to speak.
Cool.
And we're hoping that at least the next few slides that she's going to start here are really going to help with the groups that are saying, hey, we need a wind array. And of course, as you gentlemen know, the wind array is not ready really at this stage of the project. This is the leasing stage, and these slides in particular, I think are awesome resources for you guys to have at your fingertips. And without further ado, rather than listening to me, you might as well be listening to the presentation. So excuse me here.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, so brief preface. I'm not quite sure what everyone's background is with their different experience. NextEra is a pretty large company, so we have a bunch of different business units with the work parsed out to different people. And other renewable developers, I would say, are a little smaller, and so their scopes are a bit more broad. We have a lot of different subject matter experts, one of which is a group called NextEra Analytics. And with that group, they analyze the wind resource. They do it for solar too. That's a different topic. So what they do is they produce a layer like this for each wind area that we're prospecting. So any of the red areas are really high, high wind areas with really good wind resource. And any of the blue areas are kind of lower areas. The resource isn't as good. So I start by letting them know that this is a good example of like a wind area that we might be prospecting, but it's not the exact project area at hand. So this wouldn't be Glendive. I think it's some project in North Dakota. So there's the wind resource, kind of walk them through that. As we sign up landowners, we're looking for people that want to participate, and obviously people that are contiguous, because we have to have contiguous land in order to run collection. So this is an example of what we might have after we get everybody signed up for the project. The land in green would be our different leaseholds that comprise the project boundary. So this might be an example of what we have for leases. Obviously with setbacks, they vary county to county. There could be homes within the project boundaries, so that cuts into our buildable land layer. So right now, what I use this presentation for is to explain how we site our array and what we use the option grade for, especially for landowners that have a lot of pushback. They're like, well, where are you going to put the infrastructure? I don't want to sign up unless I know where the infrastructure is going to be. This is like the best tool that I have to combat that concern. And then we have setbacks from non-participating landowners. Usually, by default, it's like 1.1 times the turbine height. So if we don't know the turbine height off the top of our heads, it might be good to ask Madeline so we know for this particular project. So that also cuts into the buildable land layer. And then with other constraints, you might have like distribution lines, environmental concerns, cultural concerns, anything like that. Everything that we use the option period for is what we use to develop this buildable land layer. So we go really quickly from this leasehold to this buildable land layer. And then as we get closer to construction, we share the array only at the time that we have Exhibit Bs prepared and the developers approved us to share the array. Otherwise, as you guys probably know, the landowners get upset because then if we tell them, yeah, you're gonna get 10 turbines, and we think each turbine's roughly $10,000, and then we take away 5 of those turbines, they're gonna look at that as like they're losing $50,000 each year if we change the array on them. So we don't wanna share the array prematurely because the implications are really bad for landowners that are losing turbines. Yeah. Anybody have any questions about this presentation?
Not yet. I think I'm good.
Yeah. Well, that's about the end of it. The presentation's a little longer. It was initially intended for like a landowner dinner. But this is the most important part that I share with the landowners.
Yep. I when I'm in the field with it, I put like I draw it out where I'm like, here's the thing, and then draw circles, and so that's way nicer than what I do because I'm not a good artist for the setback aspect of it. So.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure, like historically, what you guys have dealt with in your previous work. But yeah, that's what we have.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Nessa. Well, would you be able to send that to us?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I will just
Yeah,
drop
I
in the
think it'd be
chat.
helpful to have in the briefcase as you're having some of those meetings for sure, because I know that topic's coming up more frequently because the previous group did have an array or claimed to have an array. So I think that's the best we can come up with at this time for you guys.
Yeah, it also has a slide in there about like us and our competitors. It's a few years old, but it shows kind of that we're the largest developer of wind compared to some of our competitors. That's particularly helpful when you have people that have other competitors approaching them. But I hear that that's not the case at this project, so that's good. Okay. Anybody have any questions about that before we move on to the next topic?
Nope.
Okay. So, working with Nextera, getting an agreement drafted, like an executable agreement, it takes a while. We can't draft them ourselves. We have to work with a group of contracts professionals who are like the gatekeepers of getting agreements prepared. And then it moves up to the paralegals and the attorneys to draft the agreement. Usually when I manage landowners' expectations, I let them know it'll take about a month to get an executable document prepared for them. It could take more like a month and a half or 2 months, but if you're good at kind of prodding the contracts team and following up once it's been a month, you shouldn't have to wait for too long. Let me see. I'm going to pull up an example of a checklist. So to prepare an agreement, or like with the legal team at Nextera, we have an agreement request checklist. So that's something that we populate with all the landowners' information. I'm going to pull one up for one that I've already prepared.
While you're doing that, Dessa, would you mind emailing that to us? I had for some reason, sometimes I'm able to get into the Nextera Teams, and sometimes I'm not. Because when I go to open it, it wants to take me to the Nextera site, the Nextera Teams.
Yeah. Okay. What I'll do is I'll send an email with the checklist and then a few examples once the call is over. So everything that we've discussed on this call will come to you before the end of the day.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. Okay, so here's an example of a title package that we would send to the contracts team that gets filtered up to the legal team to get these agreements drafted. A few things about it that you'll notice is the top corner. We have, I know you're probably all familiar with county APNs. Nextera has those internally assigned NEPIDs. So I don't know what the prefix would be for this project, but usually it's the state name and then county name. So it'd be like MT, and then what's the county name you're working with?
Mostly Dawson.
Dawson. Okay. So it would probably be like MTDAW, something like that. And then there would be like some numbers assigned, probably usually between 1 and 4 numbers for most of the PIDs. So that's like your unique parcel identifier. So I usually would label the agreement request with a NEPID and then a space landowner name. And then you'll have like the checklist. If you're dealing with an attorney, you'll have attorney red lines, and then a tax card, a tax map if your counties have them, and then a deed. But you'll always need a deed and a tax card. Tax map is just a bonus if you can find one. So our title policy is we go back to the latest warranty deed or deed that has warranty language. It could be like a grant deed, or it can be a quitclaim deed if it's older than 20 years. And then sometimes death certificates and probates if they apply. And then also developer approvals are required for like just any terms. If you have standard terms that are approved, usually our legal team's aware of that, so you don't need to do it for every request. But if you have anything really specific to the landowner with different terms, then we would email the developer and get an approval on that. Like if it's a really high signing bonus or something like that. And then I'm gonna open it up and run through that spreadsheet.
So then, Dessa, I'm going to share one of my screens too.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is your SharePoint. So this is title maps. So when I come in here, title maps, tax cards. So this is where we've been going to find the titles that the Nextera title team would pull, right?
Perfect. So the name is almost already correct. So then you just put like a space, dash, space, and then landowner's name. And you could make that the start of your title package.
Okay.
And nice
So
that
then,
the ownership report's already done too.
Yeah, and so then, so for us, what we're finding in here is lots of these are not correct. So they have an old deed on them, or the land is sold, or just the raw, like a 5-year-old deed, but the land transferred a year and a half ago, or whatever the case may be. So do we then do that title search and move forward with that, or how? Because I know on some of the ROEs that we were doing, we were just searching them really quick so that we could kind of speed the process along. One of the examples that we recently had was Nellie Kryman passed away. Died is this very strong language. Passed away in 2020, and the land was given to Shirley Kryman, who we're dealing with. But when we go in to look up the deed, the deed still says Nellie Kryman, and then Mitch went and found. Was that a quitclaim you found, Mitch, or was it a deed?
Yep, quick claim back in 2020. And so there's actually 4 parcels that Nellie Kryman was a part of, and with talking with Shirley, I believe 2 of the parcels went to Shirley and 2 went to I believe it's Gary, her son and daughter. But for Salesforce and everything else, we couldn't find when we're updating, even when you search Crayman, which was weird, Nelly wouldn't come up because there's a bunch of Craymans and Nelly wasn't one of them. But all the everything was still in Nelly's name.
Yeah, that's pretty common. Because nobody updates the ownership when somebody dies. That's the land team's responsibility. So when you find a situation like that, we need a tax card that is from this calendar year. So it has to be a tax card from 2023. So I'm thinking all these title packages have one from 2023. That's great. But as you're probably aware, they don't update the tax card's ownership until the next calendar year. So the tax card will have something incorrect about the landowner's name. But when you find the deed that conveys it into the new owner's name, you can update that in Salesforce. Did they show you guys how to do that when you have a change in ownership?
They did not.
Okay.
So
I can do
maybe
it if you want.
can we just, if you wouldn't mind, just because I know we have that Glendive meeting at 2:30, I'm trying to get Mitch and Tyler on probably 5 or 6 doc requests.
Yeah.
So do you do Salesforce first and update all that and then do your doc request, or can we send in the doc request without updating? What's the process there?
I would probably update Salesforce first so that as they're matching, they're going to go through and they're going to try to match those NEPIDs. So they're going to try to make sure that the parcel matches, that it's the same acreage count and it has the same owner's name.
Okay.
Before they push it through.
Okay.
And then I have one of these checklists pulled up right now. So I go from the top of it to the bottom as I populate it. A commonly missed area is up here at the top, but if you just save it with your project name, Glendive Wind, you probably would have to update the county. Sometimes you'll have multiple counties, depending on if it sits on the county line. And then the agreement type, this stands for Wind Farm Easement Agreement. You could also just spell that out, or you could put like transmission agreement. Right here is where you tell them what kind of an agreement you want drafted. And then in this area, you would just put in your name, phone number, and email address, and then save it to your template so that whenever you start on one of these, it's already there for you. The title examiner would be probably whoever uploaded the title to that SharePoint for you guys, and then the date that it was uploaded. And then if you ran it forward to get new deeds for new ownership, then you'd probably put your name and then like whatever date, like today's date, whatever date you're working on it. And then one important thing as you're talking to landowners, you should collect this information up front to the extent possible. When you get a verbal commitment from a landowner, I think it's always the best practice to ask for spouse information and then payment allocation, because you need those in order to get these agreement requests like drafted, like pushed through to actually get the drafted agreements. So this is for Scott Hornbuckle. I got his address and his phone number, and I asked for his wife's name. Her name's Mika. Nextdoor always requires consenting spouses, and if it's like a business, you don't need a spouse, and then if it's a trust, you don't need a spouse. Another thing too with this agreement request is it has all of our requirements to the side and to the bottom. So here's the policy with title, like a quitclaim deed that's 20 years or older, or a warranty deed will suffice. And then down here, you have similar requirements too. So anytime you're dealing with a trust, you always need to collect trust information. And I could show you an example of one that I prepared with trust information on it. So there's an additional document that we always have signed whenever we're dealing with a trust. So say you're working on a transmission agreement, you would also get, in addition to getting a transmission agreement signed, you'd get a certificate of trust signed. And that's so that when the trustees pass away, they know who to contact, who's the successor trustee, that kind of thing. So those requirements are here. And then any sort of legal entity, you'd go to that Secretary of State, whatever state that entity was organized in, and you'd pull an SOS filing so that they know who has signing capacity. For any kind of businesses, they're going to want to know who has signing capacity and in what role. Like if this was for Hornbuckle Ranch, I would put Hornbuckle Ranch and then Scott Hornbuckle, either like a manager or a president or a secretary, something like that, whatever the Secretary of State stipulates. And if there's multiple owners, like if there's multiple interests in a property, you'd fill this out down here, but you always have to have a payment allocation and a spouse if it's like just a single person that owns it. Down here, you get into that NEPID stuff. So you have the NEPID here, the APN, and then a brief legal description. If you get anything like meets and bounds, you can always copy and paste from the tax card or the deed. But just making it as simple as possible here, so it's not too long. And then the book and page is going to be the book and page or reception number of the vesting deed that gets into its current owner. And then the city or township, I would just put the county and state. And then the acreage count. This is critical because they're going to want it to match on Salesforce. So a lot of the time when you're running this exercise, I would have like the Salesforce Gizmo viewer up, and or the county's tax map, if the county has a tax map. Do most of these counties have a tax map or no?
Yes. Well, I can't say all in Montana, but most do. And I was going to ask you, do you want the acreage from the tax map, or because sometimes tax departments subtract like easements.
Yeah.
The acreage from the easement. So I didn't know if you wanted the number they get taxed on, or the actual gross acreage like that you can maybe find on a BLM plat map.
Good question. I would probably go and match the tax, since the tax cards are already pulled for most of the parcels in this project area. I would just check the tax map briefly and pull up Salesforce and make sure that the acreage count is approximately the same. As long as it's within like 5 or 10 acres, it's probably not a big deal.
Oh, okay.
Just look for a discrepancy. They should be pretty similar. It's not going to be really critical, but the landowners get paid on acreage for most of the easements. So probably just choose the greater of is what I usually do.
Okay, sounds good. And that mostly just applies to lots, or the government lots, but.
Yeah. And then down here in the notes is where you can call out any special provisions. Like for T-Line, we don't like to advertise that we can break it out into 2 payments. We never usually agree to annual payments. We like to do one time. But say you had a landowner that wanted their payment split out into 2 calendar years, you would call that out here in the notes for T-Line, or like if there's any special provisions for wind. But like a term sheet, I'm going to have that to you guys shortly. You could just put a term sheet in the title package, and generally on these big projects that have standardized terms across the project, you're not going to require like a developer approval for each different agreement request. And then if you had attorney red lines, this is a good place to note the attorney's like email address and phone number in case our 2 attorneys need to be in contact with each other to redline the agreement.
Sounds good.
I know this was a lot of information. Do you guys want to see any other examples like for a trust or for a business?
Yes, please.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, perfect. And I can attach some different examples to you later in an email today.
Maybe towards the end we can carve out just a little time for some specific questions too. I imagine there's a few of those. You're working on doc requests this afternoon. Maybe it's worthwhile doing that.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So here's an example that I did for a solar project in Nevada. Same would apply to wind. This is for a trust. So the few things that we need for a trust, if you're dealing with a trust, I keep this in my notes. Oh, this is cut off. There it is. So I either screenshot this or keep it in my notes. Once you get a verbal commitment for a trust, I would just try to collect all this information. Sometimes, like you guys know, the landowners, they probably might take a few days if they don't have their trust information handy, and they might fumble around if it's been a while since they organized their trust. The name and the date of the trust are usually always on the deed. So that's not something you usually need to ask for, but I would always ask if it's been amended. If the trust's been amended, then they might have changed some of the trustees or successor trustees. And then the name and address and phone number usually of successor trustees and trustees. And then the deeds obviously probably in the folders on SharePoint. But the way that I kind of tailor this so that it's not like multiple documents to request a certificate of trust is I'll put that I want a COT here at the top that indicates that it is a trust because we need it for all trusts. There's the name of the trust with the trustees. This is like a husband and a wife. And then it's unusual the way that it's organized is it has a clear succession of trustees and there is no, there's like 4 different successor trustees named in a specific order. Not all the trusts are like that, but I changed this little gray box over here to indicate like who it is. You could also use your notes down here to outline what the trust information is, but I think the easiest is to organize it like this. Here's an example of how the terms are organized too. That's usually pretty helpful. Do you guys have any questions about trust?
So should we be we'll ask them for their trust documents? What if they won't give it to us?
No, you don't really need the trust documents because Nextera, even if you have a certificate of trust that the landowner gives you, Nextera just wants, like, say it's like 20 or 100 pages. Nextera usually does like a 5-page certificate of trust, so it's just something really simple and concise for our records.
Okay.
So it's always required. Just those questions is good.
Okay.
Yeah. If you guys don't have any questions about trusts, I can move to like a business.
Yep, that would be great. Tyler and Mitch, do you guys have access to that share file that I was showing? You should. I'm pretty sure you do.
The one with the title docs and stuff?
Yeah.
Yep, I was just in there earlier with Carmen.
Yep.
Okay, here's an example from a solar project in California. The legal entity is called Sandy Prem LLC. So this is an example where it's held under like a different business entity, but the SOS filing was in Nevada. So I'm just opening this SOS filing. Have you guys dealt with many of these before?
I have not.
Okay, so if you go and you pull the tax card, if you're working with a business and you go into that SharePoint and you pull the tax card, it should have an address of whoever's paying the taxes, and that should usually match whatever Secretary of State that the business entity was formed in. So for this one, it was Nevada. It has the name of the individual. It's like the registered agent. So usually I'll just call him a manager. If nothing's set forth on the Secretary of State, this one is called a manager, but if it was just called a registered agent, just call it a manager usually. That's like the best practice. So this is Rhett. I'm not even gonna try to say the last name. Premsruet. So that who has.
Are you seeing something other than the folder?
Okay, That's the downside of Teams. Let me share
Okay.
that with you guys again. It doesn't follow you as you screen share through documents.
Okay. I was wondering. I was like, I see your mouse moving, but it doesn't look like you're pointing to anything.
No, thanks for catching that, Mitch.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, so here's a Secretary of State filing. So you just go and like say you knew it was Nevada Secretary of State. You just Google Nevada SOS and then go into their website and then click like business search, and it'll let you look up any business name located in that state or filed in that state. So for this, I went to the Nevada Secretary of State. I did a business search and I searched Sandy Prem LLC, and then it pulled up this is their filing, and it shows really for legal entities what the company's concerned with is proving who has signing capacity on behalf of that entity. So that's why we pull SOS filings for legal entities. So this one is RET Prems Rewrit. I think that's how you say it. I'm not sure. So then you'd indicate on your checklist that RET Prems Rewrit has signing capacity. So yeah, it's just an extra document that you pull for businesses. Does it seem pretty straightforward?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and then I'll click into the checklist and I'll show you how I organized it. Okay, so this one was for a solar agreement. Sandy Prem LLC, a Nevada limited liability company. They always like to know what state it is, so this part is necessary. A Nevada limited liability company. It could be a Montana limited liability company. And then underneath, I type a separate line out and I call out who has signing capacity and what their role is. And that's like the major difference when you're dealing with a business versus just an individual that owns the land.
Have you ever had a state that doesn't have the SOS filing available just online? Do you ever had to order it from any office or?
No, that's a good question. Sometimes if the state has more limited records and it asks for you to like pay for a specific like official copy, I'll just use like the cutting tool and screenshot a little snippet where it shows that it's a manager rather than wait for the official copy. And usually that's sufficient to pass it through the contracts team to the legal team.
Okay, what I found here in Montana is that they're listing a registered agent doesn't necessarily mean a manager. Sometimes it's a lawyer, sometimes it's
or an accountant, yes.
An accountant. So they're not really signing, but they handle the filings for the company. So I'm wondering if Montana might do things a little, or provide a little less information online. I'll do a little research on, maybe I'll call the office and just explore the website a little more and see if there are more links, I guess, to
There are also ways, I think, to manipulate your search with the Secretary of State. Like sometimes it'll have an initial filing or like an annual report. I would just pull whatever document you can find that matches up with the signatory that the landowner says.
Okay.
And then I know this was a lot of information. I will send some of these examples that we've been through this afternoon so you have them. But I think the next part is probably the most critical part of submitting agreement requests, and it is formatting. So we have a shared mailbox that all these go to. It's a specific email address with the Land Services shared mailbox. And then they require a very specific kind of title to get it sorted to the right person and filtered through to the right group. So I'm going to find one that I've emailed and share as an example. I can even forward you guys the email so you know exactly what the formatting is, and you can copy and paste from this.
That would be great. Thanks, Sissa.
Yeah. Okay, so here's one again from California. The title needs to start with West dash is the first part. There's no spaces. They're even critical about spaces with formatting. And then you have the state name, and then the project name, and then you do the landowner's name. So the first part of this is the title, really important. And then those zip files that I was showing you, as you get them prepared specifically for Glendive or Glendive T-Line, you'll attach a zip file here that has all that information that we just went over. And then this whole thing, you can copy and paste it for every agreement request that you do. So you have the region is West, and then you have the state and project name, and then the type of agreement. Then you have the person contacted, which is like the landowner, the manager, the president, the trustee, for whatever kind of ownership you're dealing with. The role, landowner, trustee, manager, anything like that. And then the parcel name, this should be however the property's owned. So whatever the tax card and deed stipulate, whatever shows in Salesforce, if Salesforce is correct. I mean, sometimes you might have to update the Salesforce to get the correct ownership if the ownership has since changed. And then the parcel ID, I usually just use the NextEra parcel ID here. Contact information, this stuff usually always stays the same. This yellow highlighted stuff I hardly ever change because it's almost always the same situation. So the signing temp probability, usually that should match the map. It's either going to be usually a likely or verbally committed. A warming, I always almost leave it as warming, and then a request agreement. If you're dealing with any changes, this is common. So say you get a landowner agreed to, you submit the agreement request, and then you have attorney red lines or you have any terms that change. You're going to want to find your initial submission email. Say that we were changing terms here. I would respond to this email and I would type up what we want changed about the agreement so they can implement the changes. And that would be a revision request. If you needed to do an amendment to any agreement that's already been signed, you'd start like a new chain with the contracts team, and you'd do the same thing like it's an agreement request. It would just be for an amendment. You guys have any questions about formatting?
I don't think so. If we can just copy and paste that would be wonderful.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
said.
Feel free, anytime. Okay. So I have a list of things to get over to you guys later this afternoon. Do you have any questions about any of that whole process? I know it's a lot of information.
Does that get us going, Tyler and Mitch?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, so when you see it right now, it seems like, oh, I can do that, but I'm sure that first we're gonna mess the first one up. But it always seems really easy when someone that's done it before explains it.
Yeah, we'll just need to work through.
So when we're getting the certificate of trust, are we asking for that from the landowner? And if they don't want to,
Yeah.
Okay. But we're not asking for the 30-page terms of the trust.
No.
Right, okay.
Just those questions that are outlined on that agreement request. So it's, has the trust been amended? Who are the current trustees? What are their names, addresses, and phone numbers? And then who are the successor trustees, their names, addresses, and phone numbers?
Okay.
So I'll get you guys examples of all that we just went over so you have them to refer back to, but you can always call me or text me if you have questions.
Des, I was going to let you know I recorded this. Is that okay with you? I should have asked you beforehand, but just so we have.
That's okay. That's okay. Another thing to note is out sales. If you guys are ever dealing with a property that has a piece sold off of it, they often require you to grab the out sale deed. Hopefully that's already in the title packages. Another thing you'll see sometimes is if there's exceptions in the property, like say it's for an interstate or a railroad, they might ask you to also pull that deed because they're wondering where the exception is.
Yeah.
That's why if you have the county tax maps available, that's usually helpful so you don't get as many questions or backlash on additional title documents. Kind of helps you to do that in advance if you can pull the tax map.
Sure.
I got one question. I don't think you answered it. Who has signing authority with contract for deed? Both parties or?
What'd you say?
Who's the signing authority when it's in a contract for deed? You know, like, they sold some to. Do you know a contract for deed?
I'm not. Can you give me like a brief background on that? I don't know that I'm following.
So like some people will sell to their son or brother in a contract for deed, where the warranty deed is stuck in escrow until the payments are all made, and so it's like you like say I bought it from my dad under contract for deed, and I'm farming it. It's still kind of in his. It's basically in my name, but if I miss one payment, it goes right back to him.
Okay. I feel like we would have both parties sign, and it would be similar to a remainderment situation.
Yeah, it is. It's fairly similar. Yep. I just know. I think we have at least 2 of those going on right now.
Yeah.
What is it, Gary and Darren? Or
Yep. And then
Justice.
Yep.
So the contract
yeah.
for deeds, are those recorded at the county?
Yep.
Not all the
Yeah.
time. Not all the
I
time.
guess not all the time. Yeah, not all the time.
If it's between families, sometimes they keep it between themselves. But
Okay. If it's unrecorded, then probably who's ever on the vesting deed to the current owners, even if they have a contract to eventually sell it. But best practice would probably be to have both of them signed so that we're covering all of our bases.
Okay, so the situation here is, and I don't know how this goes. Let me see who it was. The one brother doesn't even want the other brother to know that we're talking about the wind farm because he's basically buying it from him, and he wants to. It's Dale and Gary. It's the Crayman.
Oh my gosh.
And
So
I just want to know because, like, if you say, hey, both parties are going to sign, well, I think it's Gary that's buying it. And if say you say he's the only one that has signing authority, that'd be great. But we have to get his brother to sign too, and his brother, isn't fully aware. It might cause
complications.
So let me clarify. The brother that's selling the property doesn't know about, is it the wind lease? Is it wind that we're dealing with here or transmission?
Wind.
Okay, so the brother that's selling it has no idea about the wind project, but the brother that's buying it does?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a bad situation because
So
we can't have the one
last
brother.
time we talked about this, we were pretty early in the project, and we thought that perhaps this transaction may have taken place already by the time that we were looking to proceed with the document. But what I'm hearing is this is probably going to continue on a little longer. Hey, Mitch, these guys aren't going to complete this sale this fall.
Yeah, maybe. So Carmen talked to Gary. Maybe Carmen, you can just ask Gary. What they agree, like what the time frame is.
Yeah, that is on my list of questions for Gary. When
I think we're approaching a point where I think transparency is going to be necessary.
Yeah.
So, Dessa, you were probably about to say that. I think let's make a game plan how we want to have that conversation so it doesn't seem like we were not being forthright from the beginning. We maybe have to pull up just on a separate call or if you guys had some suggestions and we could maybe troubleshoot it now. I think that the honesty is probably going to serve us better, especially if we don't see an end in sight on that transaction.
Absolutely.
I agree. Yeah, the deed stipulates who signs, and if the latest deed that's recorded doesn't have him as the sole owner or an owner at all, then his brother's gonna have to sign.
Yep.
Okay, well, thanks for everybody's time. I'll get you guys an email with everything from the call today, and then term sheets will be soon to follow.
Awesome. Thank you, Dessa. That was very
Thanks,
helpful.
Lisa. Yeah, great job. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Issa.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks.